Well, this week we're back looking at the Garden Railroad, and it's been a challenge out there. This is actually last fall as we were finishing up the mortar scenery, and the very last thing I wanted to do was get some color on this.
Right.
And some waterproofing, because winter. But the cement, this time, it all seems to be holding up. The first go-round, of course, we had a lot of failure with it. That's back in week 1 on this. But the carving system seems to now be working. And I think we have that more or less figured out.
Well, so far the look is excellent. I like it.
It's looking more or less the way I had hoped it would.
Right, it looks natural.
Except the color's all wrong.
Right, it's really gray.
I wouldn't even mind it so much in this darker gray when the mortar's still wet, but as it sets up, it turns to a very light gray all the way around to pretty much a stark white.
Lunar landscape.
And because it's fall, the rains are coming. And fortunately, we got all of the cement in before it really started to rain. And I got this clever idea. I was out here trying to figure out where to install drains because clearly it needs those.
Oh my gosh.
And it occurred to me, this is maybe a great way to test putting color on, because my assumption was that while it's soaking wet like this, I could add acrylic paint. And because the cement is really wet, it would, the paint would soak right in to the wet mortar mix. So I thought, well, I'm going to grab some acrylic paints out of the garage here and just try it out. Just means working out in the rain.
That's right.
The very, very cold, on the verge of snowing rain.
Yeah. I love working with these acrylic paints. We just buy them at either Walmart or Joann's or any craft store.
They're not expensive.
No,
The small bottles are 50 cents to $1.
Right.
So the problem is they're not rated for outside.
No.
Not even close. Are they weatherproof? But I thought if they're really diluted and put onto the cement when it's really saturated with water, if the color soaks into the mortar mix, that might just work.
It could work.
So here I am out here in the freezing rain, attempting to put some color on top of the very, very wet mortar, thinking, oh, this color's just going to soak in. And as you can see, that doesn't happen at all.
No, it's washing away.
It's just washing it off as fast as I'm putting it on. And it isn't soaking in. It's just...
kind of sitting there.
There's just something about the wet surface of this. And I'm sitting there going, why isn't it soaking in? Shouldn't it be soaking in? There again, assumptions. Not always the best thing, but this seemed like it was going to be a good idea. It's just that in practice, it isn't.
It wasn't at all.
It wasn't at all. So there's the final result. And I would say that qualifies as a mess.
Yeah, that's a mess.
It's a mess. It's didn't soak in. What little bit of paint is there is just sitting on the surface, which I know will immediately wipe off. So this was idea number 2, and that was to use wood oils.
Timber oil?
This is timber oil that I've used on the bench work.
Oh, okay.
But we also have Watco.
Oh.
I thought, well, wood stain.
Okay, because I was thinking it was something to keep the trees from splitting.
It might work for that, too.
You never know.
And we could use it on the wood bridges and stuff.
Yeah, timber oil.
And here's how that worked. Or should I say didn't work.
It did something.
It sits on the surface. It doesn't soak in at all. This really saturates into wood. You spray it on mortar mix. This is what it looks like once it's dry.
Huh.
But if I can just wipe that off. If you look in a few places there, the mortar's just coming right through. It's just a sticky, gooey stuff that just sort of sits on the surface.
Have you ever considered getting some young children and sidewalk chalk? And maybe that would stay, because if you've ever had kids in sidewalk chalk, it doesn't come off.
That's a plan. So I think that's where we've gone wrong. We're using stuff that's supposed to be permanent.
Right.
And we should be using something that's supposed to be temporary.
It washes away and it doesn't.
Because, yeah, the temporary is much more permanent.
Yes.
So I waited for the rain to stop and for things to actually dry out here. It was still fairly cold. And I came in and I thought, well, I'm just going to try putting these craft paints directly on the mortar mix and shoot some water on there and get the mortar mix kind of wet, not saturated like it was with the rain. And there's got to be a way to make that color just soak into the mortar mix.
You think?
But as I look at it here, it's still just laying on the surface. It does not want to soak in.
Wow.
And in some places, it
Yeah.
seems to be sort of soaking in. But in most places, you can actually see that the paint is right on the surface. And given that this is just craft paint, I know how that's not going to work
Oh,
out.
no kidding.
Given, however, that it is fall, we should be able to test this very soon because the weather will be turning bad, and there it is. The one nice thing about this is I like the look.
Oh, it looks wonderful.
It looks so neat with snow on it and the color on the sandstone, and it's like, man, I wish it would just stay like this.
You might just get your wish.
Yeah. Well, the snow may turn into permanent, but I'm
Yeah.
afraid the color isn't going to be very pretty. But look at that. Doesn't
That's
that look
just
great?
neat. It looks real.
There's got to be some way to get that look without the paint just sitting on the surface.
Yes.
Because look what happened when the snow dried.
Oh, heavens.
So already different minerals are percolating up through the color from the cement, and the paint's already flaking off, and that's after just one little tiny snowstorm. So this is a failure. So this time I'm trying to use just a spritz bottle here and scrape the paint off, and because since it seems to be just on the surface, and look at that,
It comes off.
it just comes right back
Oh,
off.
man.
It's not really there at all. And if the color isn't soaking in, it isn't going to work. It just flat isn't going to work. I've got to find some way to get the color to soak into the mortar and not just lay on the surface. And maybe that means using a different kind of paint or something. Something else, because clearly this ain't working. The other problem also being that even after going after it with a wire brush and everything, it doesn't all come off.
No, some of it's here and some of it's not.
Yeah, there's bits and pieces, but if you look close, it's still just paint floating on the surface.
Right.
So here's the next idea. In this area where I scraped all the color off as best I could, I'm taking a very, very, very thinned down version and just painting that directly on the dry mortar.
Ah,
And the wall there took it like a stain pretty well.
nice.
In the other area, there's still some of that paint that's stuck to the surface, but in this area here, over by the portal, since I hadn't put any paint on, I waited for the hottest day possible that time of year, with the mortar as dry as possible, and then just put on thin, thin, thin coats of very, very dilute color. I would just sort of spritz it down with a little bit of water and then take very, very thinned paint and put that on top of it. And as I experimented with this, I think not even spritzing it down, just using a very thinned version of the paint, and look at that.
That looks good.
It's finally soaking in.
Nice.
So that's the key. The mortar has to be bone dry.
Ah, sort of like a they call wicking.
Yes, exactly. Because if the mortar's already wet, like in the middle of a raging rainstorm, it's just going to wash away and not stick to the surface. If the mortar's just totally dry, there's the look right there. Now the key is, how do we fix the rest of it?
Oh boy.
I also used that technique over here where the bridge is going to be. This hadn't been painted. So again, on the warmest day possible with the sun shining directly on it, so it was as warmed up as I could get it, I put on thin coat after thin coat after thin coat of very, very dilute color. And for the most part, it seems to be working.
That's neat.
And then I tried this. This is trying to get color to soak down into the cracks. And here where the paint is on the surface, you can see it doesn't really want to cooperate.
No.
But my goal was to try to get darker colors, rich browns and even blacks, down in the cracks, and then really hit that with a lot of water so that it runs off and just looks like the natural color that rolls off of the stone.
Exactly.
Now, in places like this, where there isn't already color down in this loose gravel, which is actually all cemented in place, it looks like a loose pile of material, but where there isn't any color already on the surface, it's really soaking in nicely. And the problem is in the areas where there's paint on the surface.
Oh, really?
So I'm kind of concerned with those areas, but I love this look. You know, I want to dilute it down, make it wash off as much as possible. I wouldn't want big black streaks just totally running down.
No.
But when it really runs down and soaks into the cracks and so on, that's a really good look.
Right.
So what do you think?
I think it looks good.
I love the, I'm concerned that where I can see paint on the surface, that all that surface paint's going to come off. But over here, where it's really soaked in, I did the same trick with letting the colors drain down into the cracks, and where there isn't paint on the surface, where everything is soaked in, that works really well.
Oh, good.
So I think there's a technique. It just means now how do we get rid of the paint that's already there
Good question.
without actually sandblasting or something. But I love the look over here.
Yes, I do too.
Now there's 3 stone retaining walls, and I put down the first layer of color, really letting that soak in. And then I thought, you know, I just want to come back and put color over the individual stones. But here again, once there's color there, it doesn't really want to soak in.
That's just weird.
But maybe this is going to work, maybe it isn't. I mean, we'll know come spring. But I love the look.
I do too.
I just hope that it weathers okay.
It stays.
Yeah. And then here again, I took just black and let it sort of dribble down into the cracks. But now I'm thinking, if this holds up, I want to come back and see if I can't press some white material into these mortar cracks, because then that'll match the mine structure.
Oh, right.
Because the mine structure has a light gray mortar, and that would look so much better if I can squish something down into the cracks there that's a light gray color.
Right.
And then here again, the greatest success seems to come from very, very, very light coats of color that are dilute while the stone is dry, and it does seem to soak in at that point.
Yes.
But the key is really dilute the color and then really coat after coat after coat after coat. And here I'm actually going over the individually colored stones to tone that down a bit.
Well, I sure like it.
And here again, if I can get a light gray color down into those mortar lines,
I think it'll look better.
that'll look better. Then I wanted to get back to screwing up.
Oh, really?
Well, I thought, wouldn't it be fun to get some of these different layers of stone in different colors? And I still think that's a good idea. It's just that here again, you can see that paint is just sitting right on the surface.
Yeah, I still can't figure that out. It's driving me crazy.
It will not soak in these areas. Then I thought, just to homogenize the whole thing, to kind of tone everything down and make it a more uniform color, to lightly dust Rust-Oleum paints. And I bought 3 different colors of Rust-Oleum, and I thought, mask off the track and then back off so it's just sort of overspray, very lightly cascading across the stone. And that gets rid of some of that really stark contrast, which I didn't care for the look. And I do this on the interior stuff. It kind of puts highlights when you do this. And I like the effect a lot.
It's its own oxidation.
And then the question is, what's the weather going to do?
Oh, man.
Because that's the question in all of this. What is the weather going to do? And I did the same thing over here where the color is really soaked in. You can see I just put some light highlights of the Rust-Oleum paint. And I like that look a lot.
I like it, yes.
And now the $64,000 question. How's it going to do over the winter? It's time to stop painting and let Mother Nature wreak havoc out here.
Yeah, well, and that's what's happened.
That's what's happened. So, and then as it turns out, we ended up with an incredibly, let's call it bad winter.
Yes.
Good winter if you're a hydrologist or a skier.
Right.
Bad winter for the rest of us. It was just wet, gooey storm after wet, gooey storm.
It's still going on.
And 700 inches of snow in the mountains so far.
Yes.
With more coming. So it looks neat though.
It looks authentic.
But there's the net effect.
Well, there you go. Natural weathering.
And that's one thing about garden railroading. You have to accept the fact that Mother Nature is going to wreak havoc, and that can be a good thing.
Yes.
And it can be a bad thing.
Right.
So here's a section over here where you can really see the paint is just totally sitting on the surface, and that's where I thought it's going to be a problem. Well, there's your problem.
Oh.
In those areas, the paint came completely off.
Interesting.
And we're right back down to just bare mortar. No color soaked in.
As they say, you can't fool Mother Nature.
Furthermore, the last thing I did out here is I shot a waterproofing over the whole thing. But if the paint comes off, it takes the waterproofing off, and then the water soaks into the mortar, freezes, and breaks the whole thing. So, but again, you know what? I like the look.
I do too. You're going to have to clear off your track.
Yeah, clear it, because that's pretty much what it would look like.
Yeah, it would.
It's just that I don't care for the color.
No.
But here again, if it's really dry and warm and I put a really dilute color into these broken areas, that might look really neat.
I think it could.
So the test continues. If not, then we'll put some new cement in these areas and press on. Outdoor railroading is nothing if it is not maintenance.
Exactly.
It's very maintenance intensive. But over here, everything seems to be doing just fine.
Oh, I hope so.
No color came off, no cement came off, no problems. So that technique seems to work. This other technique,
not so much.
Not so much. But we do have 2 nice areas of the railroad that are holding up really well. And time will tell.
Yes.
Maybe this stuff will all fall apart too.
I hope not. That was a lot of work.
But if it does, it's when I had the ground level railroad, that's what you did. Every spring you went out there and tore up half the track and relayed it.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of working outdoors that things are going to go wrong.
Exactly. Well, it can almost be disappointing, but in a way, no, because this looks really natural.
Yeah, that's the fun of it.
Exactly.
So I'm looking forward to the weather clearing up for a variety of reasons.
It's been clearing up. Where have you been? It's clear up to our eyebrows.
But spring will eventually spring, and it'll just go from being freezing cold out there to 107 degrees again.
That would be our garage door because it's sprung.
Oh.
The spring sprung on
The
that.
spring broke, yeah. Anyway, I'm looking forward
Yes.
to getting back out here and messing around and seeing what can be done and how it can be improved and so on and so forth.
Yes, the work.
Anyway, if you liked this video, please hit the thumbs up button. It helps out. And if you're not a subscriber, please, please, please subscribe. And you can do that by clicking on the upcoming blue button. Are we ready for that? Zoink! Right there, the blue button. Well, we're not sure how you found this video on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring, and we will see you here on Tuesday.
Yes.
We'll see you then.
We'll see ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.